Prey 2 is one of those cancelled video games that fans will just never get over. The series as a whole admittedly never had it easy, with the original sci-fi shooter starting development all the way back in 1995 and not releasing on PC and Xbox 360 until 2006. Even then it only proved a modest hit, but its tale of one man venturing to space to rescue his family did resonate enough that developers Human Head Studios were quickly put to work on a sequel. Unfortunately though, that sequel was never meant to be. The first sign of trouble came when publisher 3D Realms eventually sold the rights to the series to Bethesda in 2009. This, of course, caused something of a reshuffle in development, but 2 years later the game was officially re-unveiled, and it was announced that the original developers at Human Head Studios were still in charge of this sequel, and by all accounts, at least this was the official line anyway, development was still progressing smoothly. Even better, after this, fans got their first proper look at the game, and boy, did it look tantalizing. Swapping out the setting, main character, and tone of the original, this sequel was set to be a total reinvention. A grittier, nastier version of itself with more unique ideas to boot. To wheel out something of a tired old comparison, this was supposed to essentially be the Empire Strikes Back of this new series. Set to the tune of Johnny Cash's cover of Rusty Cage, the reveal trailer highlighted a day in the life of Amnesiac player character Killian Samuels, a bounty hunter with a wicked name living on a grotty alien world called Exodus. And as you can probably imagine before even seeing any footage, this grotty world was absolutely packed with your regular scum and villainy. Put simply, the trailer was dripping with personality, and after it dropped, players just couldn't wait to get their own hands on it and uncover the secrets of this cool-looking open world. As mentioned though, unfortunately for us, this was never to be, as the game was officially cancelled in 2014 after going silent for a couple of years in favour of a brand new reboot in 2017, this time held up by developers at Arcane. And in all fairness, in my opinion, this reboot was awesome as well, but for entirely different reasons than what we're talking about here. Despite its cancellation though, that trailer made an incredible first impression. And even today, if you go onto it now, you'll still see recent comments lamenting what could have been. My personal favourites are the recent ones pointing out that Bethesda cancelled this for quality concerns when they still released Fallout 76, which was obviously a trash fire. Because in that case, where's the lie? However, the best and most intriguing part of Prey 2 wasn't in any of these trailers at all. Hell, it wasn't something the developers would even speak about until 2017. And that's because the game's best moment was being saved as the sequel's biggest surprise, a late game series of plot twists that would have turned the entire narrative on its head. So it's probably about time that I actually explained this narrative so you understand why it sounded like such a big deal. See, the core of the original Prey centered all around this thing called the Sphere. Though it may look kind of like a planet, this was actually a sentient spaceship thing that abducted other alien races to use as a kind of food source, something that would give it more energy and sustain itself for years, decades, if not millennia to come. In the first game, of course, by the end, it gets blown all the way to hell by protagonist Tommy, but this wasn't going to be the last we heard of the mystery surrounding this sphere. And that's because whilst it initially seemed like a total departure, Prey 2 was going to eventually tie its story into this idea that there was a new sphere out there, and it was even more weird and even more mysterious than the last one. And it's not entirely clear how, but in some way this sphere was going to have some direct impact on the game world that you were exploring. So with the plan to eventually connect this story to the plot established in the first game, the thing that would unify them was the unknowable and mysterious elements that defined this weird alien phenomenon. In a great deep dive into the game's development and story that was released over in Eurogamer a few years ago, which you should definitely check out for more information, it was revealed what would happen to Killian Samuels by the end of this sequel. The video revealed that original protagonist Tommy and new playable character Samuels would eventually team up at some point in the story of the new game in an attempt to bring this new sphere down. And of course, save all of the species that it had hoovered up into its big, juicy gob. I don't think it actually has a mouth, but just imagine that. It's just taking them all up like this. Along the way, you'd realize that new character Samuels, though, didn't know anything about his past. Up until the start of the game, his time in Exodus had essentially been a constant state of purgatory, with the bounty hunter completing jobs and living day by day for years at a time. The sense that he was reliving the same day over and over again wouldn't have just been a thematic beat, though, but actually have been laid into the story itself in a more direct way. And that's because the Eurogamer video revealed that one of the late game twists would have revealed Samuels to have actually been a clone. Well, multiple clones. Now, as you're probably aware, in most games when you die in combat, that death isn't usually considered canon. It's just a fail state and you'll respawn at a previous checkpoint and continue the level as if nothing ever happened. The failure itself isn't recognized by the story and it's not really important to the story. In Prey 2 though, the game was actually going to make those player deaths integral to the story's big reveal. And that's because one of these late twists would have revealed that every single time the player died in the story, they weren't just respawning to another checkpoint. That Samuels that they were actually controlling would be dead, and that the new one that they respawned as would be an entirely different clone of him. Each death was a real death in the story, just the character's amnesia would mean that you nor he would remember what the hell had happened. And of course, as a player, why would you think anything of this? You've done this over and over again in other video games and never questioned it before, so why would you start here? So every single time you died in the game and then Samuels reawoke in his apartment, that would be a new Samuels clone being activated that you then took control of. And this revelation was supposed to be even cooler in practice. While it sounds already pretty intriguing on paper, the way that the game was going to reveal this to you just sounds spectacular. While attacking the sphere, Samuels would eventually stumble into a room, but it wasn't just going to be any room. This room was going to be littered with corpses that looked just like him. It was going to be wall-to-wall corpses of his dead clones. Now, I don't know about you, but the idea of getting the reveal that way with that image is just incredibly tantalizing, as it would have completely changed the way that you viewed your entire play experience until that point, realizing that every single time you died, one of those corpses was going to end up in this room. Even if the game itself wasn't fun until that point, this is the kind of twist that would have been talked about for years regardless. Hell, I'm still here years later talking about it, and the game wasn't even made. There is one final wrinkle to this story though, and that's Prey 2's final twist. Again, according to the Eurogamer report, after all of the story was done and this twist had been revealed, Samuels would get something of a happy ending. He'd end up teleported back to Earth, where he would live out the remainder of his life in a relative peace. He was allowed to grow old, and the player could see him live out this life until he died peacefully. This death, however, would only bring him more pain. And that's because a final stinger would show him waking up once again, back on Exodus and back in his apartment. And it's like, goddamn, why was this game cancelled? And that's coming from someone who really loves the reboot. Why couldn't we have just had both? So many games focus on the act of dying and then respawning, but you're not supposed to think about it outside of a kind of challenge level. And yeah, while there have been some games since that have incorporated the death in the gameplay with deaths in the story, I mean, just think of Deathloop last year, for instance, which was actually, interestingly enough, made by Arcane, the people who took over Prey, which was a game where you were in a time loop and every death was canon as well. It's still not really common, and it definitely wasn't common back when Prey 2 was in development, and this twist would have definitely allowed the game to stand out from the pack. Now, if you thought this was the end of the video, you'd be completely mistaken, because it wouldn't be a video all about a video game plot twist if I didn't have a plot twist of my own that I had under my sleeves, which have been rolled up. I really hope I haven't kind of shown it off, to be fair. That wasn't actually a joke, just I started this video with my sleeves rolled up and I've been wanting to put them down all video and I couldn't find a way to do it without breaking continuity, so that's how we do it. We're professionals over at WhatCulture.com. Before I go into my own twist for this video though, I just want to make it clear that there's about to be heavy spoilers for Returnal, so if you don't want to know, then this is your final warning. I need to spoil this game because, in a way, the title of this video is actually kind of a lie. Prey 2 was definitely cancelled, and the twist definitely died with it, but we still got a version of it in another game. Returnal is a third-person shooter game where you play as Celine, an astronaut who has crash-landed on an alien planet and has to relive the same day over and over again. Every time she dies, she goes back to her ship and she has to start her adventure from the beginning. Like Samuel, Celine's history is drenched in mystery. And after a few hours of blasting your way through the shape-shifting planet, you start to come across bodies that again look directly identical to Celine herself. It quickly becomes apparent then that this isn't Celine's first attempt to get off this planet. Like in the proposed Prey 2, each time the player died, the implication is that you were adding to these corpses, which would actually show up in the worlds of other players' games online, and thus you were starting as a new, fresh Celine for each run. And while that's already similar, it's Returnal's mid-game twist that really ties it directly to Prey 2. Here, after slogging through 3 full biomes, the player and Celine finally manage to escape the planet and head back to Earth. And when you get there, you're treated to a cutscene that shows Celine living out the rest of her life, again, dying very peacefully towards the end at a ripe old age. Now, does this sound a little bit familiar? The final scene sees Celine's body lowered into a casket when it suddenly cuts, and she wakes up once again back on the alien planet looking much younger. The revelation is that while she might have managed to escape the planet, she didn't sever the time loop, and thus when she died of natural causes, it was the exact same as her dying by being mauled by an alien thousands of light years away. So yeah, while Returnal might not have been Prey 2, it's still really cool that we got this other awesome sci-fi game with a twist that was surprisingly similar to this great one from a cancelled video game. And let's just hope whatever happens in the future, we get more Prey goodness in whatever form it takes. So that's the best plot twist we never got to play. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below about Prey 2 and whether or not Returnal's twist was a kind of worthy substitute. As I mentioned at the beginning as well, a lot of this information comes from that deep dive Eurogamer did, so you should definitely check out their video for more plot details, as well as a lot more about the development, combat, etc, etc. Likewise, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've been Josh, and I'll see you soon.